Let's psychoanalyze Chris from the Love is Blind reunion. This is actually my first video, so I want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Gia. I'm a therapist in training. It's actually my last year of school, so yay. I'm so excited to graduate. I have a bachelor's and master's in psychology. I post mental health content and whatever else makes my soul happy, and I'm really glad that you're here. I want to chat about a couple of things before we get into analyzing. One thing is that I will not be diagnosing Chris or even talking about potential diagnoses. I'm obviously not fully licensed yet, but aside from that, I do believe that it's irresponsible and harmful. Diagnoses aren't terms to throw around, and with the rise of armchair psychs on social media, I think it's an important discussion to have. And it's important to not slap a diagnostic label on someone that we don't have a background on, and we only see what reality TV wants us to see of them. Diagnosis is part of consensual treatment plans in a therapeutic relationship. Slapping on studied, nuanced diagnoses of an individual is not fair to them and spreads harmful rhetoric that promotes these armchair psychs on social media and the general public regarding mental health. With that, although behavior can be explained, that does not mean that it's justified. Every behavior can have a deeper analysis, but that does not give it immunity to being abusive or harmful. None of what I'll be talking about today is meant to be a justification for Chris's actions and behaviors towards anyone. My goal here is to discuss Chris's behaviors and analyze it in the reunion from a psychologically informed, neutral, analytical way. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get started.
Well, guys, according to Chris, for things to work out, sometimes you need to work out. You managed to piss off all the ladies and all the men.
So immediately, just by Chris's body language, we can tell that he's uncomfortable. He has a tight jaw, controlled mouth. This often signals suppressed emotions. It can mean frustration, embarrassment, and an effort to maintain composure.
And watching it back for Vanessa and I was absolutely brutal.
You know, watching it back was tough. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not proud of a lot of those moments.
That's it?
There's a couple things here that are kind of interesting to analyze. The first one being is that he's pausing after being asked a pretty difficult question, and that can mean cognitive processing, emotional regulation, or careful wording to avoid escalation, which I can assume he's doing because he's been receiving a lot of hate after, everything that went down in Love is Blind, and so it's understandable why he's trying to choose careful words. So on reality TV, this can kind of read as strategic communication. We also see that Chris is nodding his head when he's being criticized. And this is a really fascinating social behavior. People sometimes nod when they're listening to criticism because they're trying to signal listening, reduce conflict, and show cooperation. But this can also appear detached or performative to observers, which we see in the audience reactions and among the other cast members.
Connor just illustrated for us how close the two of you were during filming.
I'm sorry I disrespected you. I want to be accountable for what I did and what I said. And putting Bree in that situation as well. I want to give, you asked her a question about, do you feel like you gave Chris a little bit of time? I feel like I put her in that situation and was just way too maybe aggressive in that moment.
So obviously he had to be prompted to give a proper apology. He decided to remain very curt and short during his initial response to the question, then had to be prompted by someone to go deeper into that. And during this, Chris seems to be very aware of how he's being perceived by the group. It seems like he's having measured responses rather than spontaneous reactions. This can signal high social evaluative sensitivity. That means that someone is very attuned to how others are judging them. And people with this trait often try to repair their image very quickly.
Why were you so complimentary to Jess about your physical connection if you had doubts?
I wouldn't say I had doubts in that moment. Like, we just met each other for the first 24 hours. We had this amazing connection in the pods. And I really was I didn't want to put negative thoughts in my head or anything I was feeling in those moments. And I really just wanted to go through this experiment the way it was supposed to be.
Here we see that some of Chris's responses are leaning towards explanatory rather than direct ownership. Instead of simple accountability like I messed up, the pattern sometimes looks like explaining context, which he did, emphasizing misunderstandings, which he clarified, I went into this open-minded and the feelings were true in Mexico and in the pods. And then he highlights his intentions, that he fully intended to participate in this experience. In psychology, this is called rationalization. And it's a common defense mechanism where someone explains behavior in a way that makes it feel more reasonable or justified. The other part that I'm noticing with him is identity protection. There's a subtle dynamic here with Chris trying to protect his identity narrative. Many participants on the show want to be seen as emotionally mature, respectful, and sincere. So when the reunion challenges that narrative, people often engage in identity repair behaviors, such as emphasizing their intentions, pointing out positive actions. I came into this with an open mind, the feelings were real, and reframing events. And this is actually a normal psychological reaction when someone's public identity is scrutinized.
When somebody has deep insecurities, often the human reaction to that is to try to bring somebody else down.
What do you think some of those insecurities were on Chris's part?
Finances, huge bravado and dominance and alpha shit. And the reality was very, very different than what was being shown.
You can tell that he's tensing up when this kind of comes up. And it's a common pattern that we see, especially with men that have this alpha mindset, that if the partner that they're dating is making more money or more successful than them, there can be that intimidation factor. And if someone is already insecure about that, those types of relationships bring it out of them. And I kind of want to talk about this group dynamic that's going on here too. In groups that live together intensely, like this cast, people often develop rapid social pattern recognition. Cast members may notice tone changes, subtle defensiveness, and mismatched emotional responses. So those cues kind of lead to the feeling of something's not adding up. So because this group already has a perception of Chris, if Chris initially presented himself as sincere, straightforward, and emotionally aware, then behavior that contradicts that image causes stronger reactions than if someone had always been messy. And psychology research shows that people punish moral inconsistency more than bad behavior alone. And that's what we see with Chris. He started off where he was perceived as this really good guy and he really cared about Jess. And then switching the narrative over and doing what he did, that inconsistency is almost worse than just the bad behavior itself. And reunions are basically perfect conditions for group dynamics to intensify. And several psychological effects happen simultaneously. One of these things is called moral alignment. Once one person calls out behavior, others join in to show they share the same values. We see this with the group reaction and the audience reaction. So an example of this is person A criticizes someone, person B agrees publicly, person C adds another criticism. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. So suddenly it becomes this collective accountability moment. And in groups, when we're seeing these reactions from other people or input, people feel less personally responsible for criticism because everyone's doing it. So this can make people feel comfortable speaking harshly. Also, everyone here knows that millions of people are watching. So that encourages people to demonstrate integrity, loyalty to friends, and strong moral boundaries. They don't want to be perceived as they're supporting this kind of behavior. And this can unintentionally intensify confrontations here.
It was not the truth.
So what was the truth? In that moment, was it what you said?
The truth was I was emotionally immature and I put physical chemistry over emotional connection.
I keep seeing this with Chris, and whenever he's talking about accountability or something about himself that perceives as self-aware, he's nodding his head no. And sometimes, this doesn't matter, but in this case, and seeing Chris throughout this season, nodding your head while you're saying something like that can signify that you don't truly believe this. And usually we're not conscious of this behavior. The other thing that I'm kind of noticing is Chris is staying relatively calm, and this is kind of creating an interesting psychological contrast. So when someone remains composed while others are upset, observers interpret this in different ways. A positive interpretation would be they're emotionally mature, they're regulated, they're reflective. Negative interpretations might include that they're detached, they're calculated, they're not remorseful. The brain tends to choose whichever interpretation fits the narrative that they have already formed. And what may be happening to Chris psychologically right now with the finances being brought up as well is this self-concept threat. If someone sees themselves as respectful, ethical, emotionally intelligent, public criticism threatens that identity. So again, we see these common responses. We see explaining context. We see emphasizing intentions. We see maintaining composure, which he's doing a really good job at right now. We see trying to repair reputation. And again, these are very normal human defense approaches and responses, especially under public scrutiny like this.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm taking steps to, be more emotionally mature. And I don't think it was obviously fully aware I was ready for that coming into this.
Have anything you'd like to say to Jess? This is the time.
I'm sorry the way I treated you, Jess. And I'm sorry I couldn't be there emotionally what you needed and everything else.
Thank you for apologizing, and more importantly, thank you for showing me who you were quickly.
So the entire psychological theme with Chris at this reunion kind of looked like accountability, pressure, social scrutiny, and identity defense strategies. These strategies often include rationalization, which we saw with him, impression management, and emotional containment. That is it for my psychoanalysis of Chris on the Love is Blind reunion. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe. I'll be using this channel to talk about all things therapy and mental health and grad school, and also some lifestyle things thrown in there. I'm really glad that you're here, and have a great day.